Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you on this. It's the Gryphon. This is a tier 10 British heavy tank and it will be coming to the assembly shop this Thursday. This vehicle has an auto reloader with 420 alpha damage, which is able to deliver twice within 2.5 seconds. Does that mean that this is going to be the new best British heavy tank? Well, that's my job to let you know today. So let's compare the Gryphon to the current best British heavy tank, the can opener, also the controversial and relatively new Chieftain, and the Super Conqueror as well. Immediately we notice that the Gryphon has a tiny damage per minute edge over the Chieftain, but remember this, as this is an auto reloader, it can't use a gun rammer. So the can opener definitely it can't use a gun rammer as well. The Super Conqueror will be able to get up to that Gryphon level DPM, and the Chieftain will be able to obliterate the Gryphon on DPM once you use a gun rammer on that tank. But that does free up an equipment slot on the Gryphon for you to choose what you think will be best on the tank. The vehicle gets 263 penetration with its standard AP rounds, 319 on its APCR, and a disappointing 60 on its HE. This means that unlike the Chieftain and the Super Conqueror, which have fabulous high explosive penetration, that you're not really able to use those HE rounds as effectively. And keep in mind that as this is an auto reloader, you could intuition switch out, but it kind of would be a wasted crew slot. And also, you'd have to trade 2 shells for 1 shell. And whether that's worth it for the HE, almost certainly not. You'd be best to fire the 2 AP shells, unless you only have like a second to fire, and you must have that 500 alpha damage. Because your 420 regular rounds are not enough to be able to one-shot a one-shot tank. Okay, so the clip size, as I said, 2. So it's the first tier 10 British auto-loading heavy. And it takes 2.5 seconds to be able to deliver these shells. That's 840 in 2.5 seconds. That's absolutely phenomenal. The can opener, however, of course, can deliver that double barrel burst. So that vehicle can do 840 instantly. The Gryphon will take that 2.5 seconds to be able to deliver it. But remember that the can opener, it can only fire 1 barrel and then it has to wait for a full reload before it can fire again. So the Gryphon, on the other hand, would be the new best tier 10 British heavy tank at killing 2 tanks very quickly, as long as they're a one-shot. Gun handling wise, it's not really good news for the Gryphon. Worst aim time here, worst accuracy here, and the joint worst dispersion values, apart from the turret traverse compared to the can opener in this comparison. I should also give a passing mention to how annoying this vehicle is with regards to its ammo loadout. 40 is irritating when you consider that if you want to switch shells between your AP and your APCR, that quite often you can be running low of one type of ammunition towards the end of the battle. That's something that the Super Conqueror shares, and it's really irritating compared to a Chieftain or a can opener, which you could pretty much destroy the entirety of the enemy team. So back to the gun handling. All of these vehicles have 10 degrees of gun depression. One slightly nice thing about the Gryphon is its bloom after firing is slightly better than the other vehicles, and that's nice because it wants to deliver that double tap. But still, all in all, the Gryphon has the worst gun handling of any of these British heavy tanks, and you can feel it on the battlefield. Mobility-wise, 43 forwards and 15 backwards is comparable to the Chieftain, and the power-to-weight ratio is best in this comparison, and its ground resistances are also better, meaning that this thing truly does feel like it's a different class of heavy tank, more of a medium with regards to its mobility. Not quite as good as the Concept 1B, for example, but similar to it. Armor-wise, it's kind of a bit of a letdown for the Gryphon, however. 80 on the front of the hull, 60 on the side of the hull, 250 on the front of the turret and 110 on the side. When we take a look at the armor model of this vehicle, you'll think, wow, it looks a lot like a Concept. However, it does have this increased weak point on the forehead here compared to the Concept. This is pennable by tier 9 tanks and maybe some tier 8s when it's not using its gun depression. And it does have a crown on top as well that becomes increasingly vulnerable depending on how tall you are compared to the Gryphon. However, when you are using the vehicle's 10 degrees of gun depression, the turret does become quite good, and your opponents are going to have tier 10 gold to stand a chance of going through the mantlet, but be careful about exposing yourself to tier 10 tank destroyers. Also, this kind of neck of the Gryphon when it's using its gun depression is not so good. It's a little bit better when you're not using the gun depression, but yeah, only 250 to be able to go through the neck, so be careful with exposing too much outside of just the peak of your turret. Hull armor wise, the lower plate is tragic. It's easily penetrable from pretty much everywhere. The upper hull is good. It will be able to provide some ricochets, but again, if people are shooting down on it, it's rather poor. So you want to be trying to angle or use any of your kind of gun depression on this tank. The side of the hull as well, not great news. Luckily, it does have 60 millimeters of side armor, unlike a Chieftain, so it can't be overmatched there. But all in all, it's just a mess, really, this hull armor design. I don't like the hull on this vehicle at all, and furthermore, I really hate the fact that this side armor becomes weak very quickly when you're turning the turret to the side, so be careful about exposing that part of the vehicle as well. All in all, I'd say it has far worse armor than the can opener, and even worse armor than the Super Conqueror as well. This relatively weak armor loadout is compounded by the fact that the vehicle has 2,000 hit points currently, but on release day, Wargaming are buffing this up to 2,100. Still, that's going to be a 5 to 10% margin lower than the other vehicles in this comparison. So do keep in mind this is a vehicle that truly does exchange some of its durability to be able to gain a touch of mobility and the access to that double shot auto reloader. View range wise, 400 is fantastic, so you're going to be able to spot your opponents even without a premium consumable. And the vehicle has a 15% chance to be set on fire, which is slightly better than the Conqueror and the can opener. Crew wise, you'll be happy if you have a decent British heavy tank crew. Your Super Conqueror crew will work perfectly in this vehicle. Crew skills wise, for your commander, I would recommend you take Brothers, Repairs, Recon, Emergency, Coordination, and Practicality on this vehicle. For your gunner, I'd recommend Brothers, Repairs, Snapshot, Deadeye, Designated Target, and Armorer, or you could drop out Designated Target for quick aiming if you wanted to help with that double shot a little bit. For your driver, Brothers, Repairs, Smooth Ride, Off-Road Driving, Engineer, and then either controlled impact or clutch braking will do well on this vehicle if you find yourselves just absolutely hating how much you get pounded by artillery. Drop controlled impact for reliable placement. For your loader, Brothers, Repairs, Adrenaline Rush, Close Quarters Combat, Ammo Tuning, and then I would personally take either Perfect Charge or Safe Stowage, depending on whether you want to focus on your sniping or your reaction shells, or alternatively to prevent yourself from getting ammo racked. You'll see that I have Intuition on this vehicle. I think it's completely wasted to have Intuition, but I'm realistically not going to train an entire loader for this vehicle, but you should if you kind of really care about your Gryphon. For your radio operator skills, I would recommend situational awareness, side-by-side, and firefighting on this tank. Equipment-wise, I'm going to run 2 builds on this tank. One is going to be vents, a turbo, and vertical stabilizers, and my second build on this vehicle, I'm going to use a durability device with vents and vert stabs. For the field mods on this tank, I would recommend the all-terrain suspension to maximize that vehicle's good mobility, improve the accuracy, improve the view range. I'd recommend a turbo slot on this vehicle to be able to make use of the turbo bonus. And you can also still improve your vents with a durability build for your kind of like second loadout on this tank. For your penultimate field mod, I would recommend the reverse speed. And for the final field mod, it's a matter of preference. You could go with the dispersion improvement here, as the movement dispersion is not good on this tank at 0.16, especially if you're someone who wants to drop the vert stabs. But considering you can't use a gun rammer, I'm going to use vert stabs on both builds on this vehicle. You could go the other way to make yourself less vulnerable to ramming and HE shells from the artillery. Again, matter of preference. Anyway, I think that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's get stuck into some combat. So let's roll out in the Gryphon in our inaugural game. We're going to be playing on Cliff, and we're going to be against tier 10 tanks. So, the Gryphon. Get an idea of its speed, being able to get into position. As I mentioned, this vehicle is just a little bit faster than all of the other tier 10 British heavy tanks. So it does feel a little bit more like a medium. You know, you'll be used to it when you're driving around in something like a Concept 1B. If you're used to driving around in a Concept 1B, then you'll be used to the Gryphon's kind of speed. The Concept 1B is still faster, right? But yeah, it's the difference between the other British heavies and this vehicle. So it's always really interesting to see a brand new mechanic. So this is the first ever British heavy tank with an autoloader, right? This one with an auto reloader, and to have those 2 shells just looking at you as these 2 golden opportunities in the middle of your screen really makes me want to get into a forward position using the speed and try and shoot tanks that are advancing. And there's the first, and there's the second. And we can see while the gun handling, the accuracy especially, not particularly incredible compared to the other British heavies. And here we go, some random damage that we're only going to be able to find out whether we get at the end of the game. That 1-2 shot for 840 average damage into the FV215B183 is pretty brutal. And I give a thumbs up to the DBV there to get a very dangerous tank, the Batchat, out of a very dangerous position in those bushes. And that means that now, with nobody in that position, that I can feel a lot safer about maybe either going after the C50M or alternatively realizing, I don't really need to do that. I don't think he's going to stand a chance against a UDES and 3 tank destroyers. So instead, why not turn around and just try and support this flank? Unfortunately, the DBV on my team makes a huge misplay with going forwards and gets absolutely farmed, but that's just going to leave the job for me. So do take a look at that second shell. 20-second reload for that second shell. So this is an inverted auto reloader. So a lot like the Soviet ones that you'll have on an IS-3A, for example. The goal of this tank is basically just to fire a shell if you have a shot. Pretty much don't wait for a reload unless I'd say you're about like 3 seconds or so from being able to reload that extra shell. Because remember, like the reload on that standard shell, if you're using vent and you're using a premium consumable, it's going to be about 7.5 seconds. So waiting for 3, you might as well just fire the shell, and then you'll reload in 7.5 seconds anyway. So make sure you don't ever get into a trap of waiting like 8 seconds before you fire. If there's a target of opportunity, you might as well just fire the shell. Not wait for the reload, even if you're close like this. It's dubious about whether you should, because by waiting those 4 seconds, do you make it so that you're really do you make it so that you're really going to? Is it going to have a game-changing implication? And also remember that if you wait for that shell to reload, that you're going to have 2.5 second intra clip anyway. So effectively, you should only really wait if you've got about 4 seconds left. And that's if you're going to be able to not take damage for those 4 seconds and deliver the 2 shells easily on the target, and they're not going to change the angle of their armor. So it's a little bit of a weird one, this vehicle, when you think about it. 7.5 second naturally if you've got brothers, vents, and nice blind fire there. The second medium tank that we got out of that position. So you've got like a 7.5 second reload default for that shell if you've got brothers of premium consumable and vents. And then you'll have to have a 2.5 second intra clip. So imagine it like this. Let's say you've got 5 seconds left waiting for the shell, and you've got a target of opportunity, but they've got more than like 500 hit points, and so you definitely will need those 2 shells to be able to deal with them. So if you've got 5 second reload left on your second shell, like now, you wait 5 seconds, you fire, then you have 2.5 seconds before you get access to the second shell, okay? So that's effectively 7.5 seconds from your 5 second reload to be able to deliver 2 shots. Now imagine if instead you just fired. Now you would have lost all of the reload for the second shell. You would have fired the shell that was inside the tank, but then you'll start a reloading process with no intra-clip reload, right? So you'll not have that 2.5 seconds. So actually, it's just as fast to get 2 shells out to fire and then reload for 5 seconds. And then, it's just as fast to fire the shell and then reload for 7.5 seconds as it will be to wait for 5 and then to have that 2.5 seconds intra-clip delay. Now, of course, you could argue that having 2 shells that you deliver in 2.5 seconds will give you a better opportunity to maybe track enemy tanks. It will give you a little bit of a better opportunity to maybe do some module damage that they can't recover from. That's RNG, and that's a different situation that you'll have to account for on a case-by-case basis. But more often than not, the goal of this vehicle should be that if you have a shell and you're 90% sure that you can penetrate the target, it doesn't really matter what your reload status is of the second shell, you should dump it. Now, the only time that you should really be looking to use that second shell is if you've naturally kind of recovered it, and it will allow you this perfect opportunity of being able to deliver not just 1, but deliver 2, and then to only have a 7.5 second reload afterwards. So that is pretty scary. This vehicle, in theory, if it's fully loaded, could deliver 3 shells within 10 seconds. That's pretty nasty. That's a 1,260 damage burst in 10 seconds. Absolutely brutal stuff there. And for a lot of tanks, that's kind of like carving up the entirety of a tier 8, or alternatively, it's absolutely crippling a tier 9 or a tier 10, and half-healthing a DBV 152 there. absolutely nasty stuff. And when this tank gets going in these kind of engagements where it has some downtime, gets opportunities to use its gun depression, gets opportunities to deliver its 1-2 burst, then, you know, you're absolutely doing great. So far so good for the Gryphon. We've seen 5,400 damage that we've dealt. We have no idea about how many shells we hit on the Leopard and the Batchat, but we know we hit 1. So I'm going to make a call here, and that is, I will help you, Mr. 60TP, flank him. Right now, this situation is going to get worse and worse as World of Tanks just alt-tabbed me. Sorry about that. Does World of Tanks alt-tab any of you? For some reason, randomly. I think it's Wargaming's launcher when there are micro patches or when there's updates coming up. I swear that the Wargaming launcher alt-tabs me. Let me know in the comments down below if it does it to you. It's infuriating. I'll be in the middle of the game, as we just saw. Anyway, I digress. We've got a situation here where it's pretty much even up until the UDES managed to catch the DBV. And what I'm trying to strongly encourage the team is to let them know where the DBV is, because he's spotting me. And also, they have an artillery, we don't. And the longer we wait here, the worse this game is going to get. I do feel that my position up here is very important, because this position is stopping that DBV from coming around the corner, and it also allow me to be able to handle the Grilla. And unfortunately, the M48 and the 60TP are just going to make mistake after mistake after mistake. The M48 randomly drives up in front of 2 DBVs, and the 60TP is looking around the corner. I try to blind fire a shell. And what we need the 60TP to do while the UDES was distracting the other DBV is simply to just, can even fly his path. This is what he should have done. He should have just driven along here, made his way along, and then he could have just shot the DBV from a hold down position here. He wouldn't have been shot by the Grilla, who's potentially at the back of the map still, and then if the DBV had moved, I would have been able to deal with him. But the 60TP seems more hell-bent on just camping, waiting for the DBV to push forwards, a tank which he doesn't seem to be able to spot right now, and that is going to leave me in an incredibly awkward situation of trying to play guess the DBV, while also getting shot by an artillery who's making very intelligent plays. You'll see that he's moving from south through towards the north, now in the H1 area, and that makes it so this is going to be an incredibly awkward scenario for me. And now, a one-shot, having lost about 700 hit points, or nearer 600 hit points to 3 good artillery shells, which is now 1,000 hit points to an artillery who was once again relocated, now more in towards the G1 area than the H1 area. You know what? A massive thumbs up to that artillery. It's the perfect example of these close endgame situations where artillery forces one team to have to make an attack. It's just really unfortunate when you're playing with the team that was completely unwilling to make the attack and has just walked straight into the hands of the DBVs. So at the stage of the game, I was thinking, okay, Object 261 is now blind firing me where I was. I have to just hold back and just hope that one of the DBVs is going to make a mistake and the 60TP puts a Hail Mary shot in. But we also have to worry about the Grilla on the enemy team. There we go. There's one. Are we going to follow it up? Yes, we are. And that's exactly what we need. Maybe a chance to be able to get back into the game. And now you'll see that I'm using the ruined lighthouse here to be able to line it up with the artillery to make it tricky for him. We can see the artillery doesn't fire, so that gives me a little bit of a hope that maybe I'm going to be able to survive this shell. And also, at this stage of the game, 10 minutes in, and that artillery, they fired 5 shells at me just since I've been up on the hill, right? That tank only carries 20 rounds of ammunition. It can run out of ammunition fairly quickly. So I was maybe thinking, well, if I can get the artillery to miss a little bit more, maybe there's an opportunity that the artillery won't have any shells, and then the DBVs are forced to attack us. But somebody enters the cap circle. Now, in retrospect, looking at this situation, you know, it could be the artillery that's made it there. That's going to make this incredibly awkward if the artillery is in that position with a shot on me now, because I'll have a Grilla down towards the south. So I tell the 60TP that I'm going to have to move, I'm going to have to flank, and with only 92 hit points now, whoa, this slope could be my grisly demise, but we're going to have to just see what we can do, and, you know, time is forcing us. Unfortunately, the 60TP gets caught by the DBV, and now things are starting to look fairly ugly. I have a quick look to see that the DBV is a 2-shot for me, with his 500 hit points, but we begin a 1 versus 4 situation. With only 55 seconds left, I've got to push the cap, and it's the RT. Don't even quite manage to catch out the Grilla at the end. But This game was really telling about the strengths and the weaknesses of the Gryphon. A fantastic tank with regards to its speed to be able to get into position. Fantastic tank with being able to deliver that 1-2 punch and then not have to worry about having a lengthy reload afterwards. It never truly feels like it's a brutal autoloader, but it never truly feels like it's a single shot tank as well. Thumbs up to the enemy team in this one for finishing it off, and a big thumbs up to the Object 261, who made some fantastic... Who would have thought artillery would actually leave base and be able to dig me out? Poof. Luckily, it looks like I hit a few blind shots here, as we did 7,200 damage, and that was enough to net us a high caliber. And if only that 60 TP on our team had put in more than 2 shots worth of damage, we might have been able to take this one down. And yeah, as I thought at the time, artillery fired every single one of their 20 shells and then made a great play as well to cap. 10 out of 10 play by that artillery. GG, you definitely won this game at the end. So round 2 for the Gryphon on Muravanka, and I also really want to come to a conclusion about this tank. Okay, so look, the vehicle's hull armor is awful. It really is. Its side armor is awful. Its side profile and its turret is awful. You really want to try and do everything that you can to be able to keep your opponents cleanly in front of the vehicle. Also, its side scraping opportunities are very weak with the weak points on the side. So this vehicle is one that will do well on a ridgeline fight where it gets to control the engagement and look for targets of opportunities, and it'll do very badly when it comes to either exposing itself or alternatively when it is in a city fight. And that's all there really is to say about the Gryphon. Do I think it's the new best tier 10 British heavy tank? No, I don't. I think the can opener absolutely smashes this. The reliability of the turret on the can opener, the reliability of the hull. And what you're going to see in this game is how annoying this gun can be when your opponents are either a little armored or if they're just moving at all. A whiff, okay. And that is one of the biggest realities of this vehicle. You can see that I stop and just go, what? No way. No way did I just miss my target of opportunity there on Muravanka. And look, if you were to just look at some of the statistics and think, wow, look at the firepower of this vehicle. Looks incredible, right? There is such a huge difference between the way that this vehicle handles and, say, the can opener handles. For me personally, on the can opener is not a tank that needs to use vert stabs. On the can opener, for me, because it doesn't really have an autoloader, it either has the double barrel or it fires a single shot. For me, I take an aiming device on the can opener. I use a Bond aiming device to be able to improve that horrible double accuracy to make it more usable. And remember, on the can opener, inside its double mode, it has perfect dispersion. No dispersion at all. It's just the accuracy that gets horrendous, but it has like 0.01%, 0.01 moving dispersion, turning dispersion, and its turret traverse dispersion as well. And so the can opener becomes this amazing sniper of which I just don't miss shots and I don't end up getting frustrated. And yeah, if you saw my game on Cliff, you'll think, oh wow, yeah, this tank looks like my cup of tea. And I'm not saying the vehicle is a bad vehicle at all. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. But the can opener just absolutely demolishes this thing in so many other areas. It demolishes it in a city fight. It demolishes when it comes to sniping. It demolishes it when it comes down to delivering 2 shots instantly, albeit not accurately, whereas it will take the Gryphon 2.5 seconds to be able to deliver those 2 shots. And also, the can opener will actually reload 2 shells faster than the Gryphon will reload 2. Because remember, the Gryphon only has that great 2,900 damage per minute for when it's empty. Its damage per minute is actually only like 1,260 when it comes to firing the second shell. And while, you know, you get those beautiful moments against a T-57 Heavy where I have turret armor, he does not have turret armor, and my intra-clip reload's only a little bit longer than his, and I've got extra alpha damage, and then it feels beautiful. And then you get into those situations where you just don't feel like you're truly a sniping British heavy tank, and that makes it oh so awkward for just missing golden opportunities and getting punished by your enemies. And so, the Gryphon, I think it's a good tank. It's a good tank. And until Wargaming nerfed the can opener, I think the can opener absolutely trashes the Gryphon. So, let's think about how this vehicle holds up against the Chieftain. How does this vehicle hold up against the Chieftain if you gambled to be able to get it in tier 3 loot boxes? Well, the Chieftain in a sustained fight absolutely demolishes this thing on damage output. It has gun handling that makes this thing feel like it's a horrible tank. It really does. The Chieftain's gun handling is incredible. Remember, the Chieftain with the rammer is going to, again, demolish this thing when it comes to damage per minute output. Especially when you take into account about that gun rammer, and when you stack up all of the advantages like taking adrenaline rush on that vehicle and so on and so forth, then all of these things add together to make the Chieftain an absolute brutal vehicle. But also then you have those moments where the Gryphon delivers 2 shots, tilts out the Rinoceronte into pushing forwards in front of a tank destroyer, and then the Gryphon feels great in that situation. I'd say the Gryphon and the Chieftain have comparable turret armor. I'd say the weak point on the Chieftain's a little bit worse, but I'd actually prefer to be in a Chieftain when it comes to kind of like getting shot in the side of the turret, whereas I'd rather be in the Gryphon if it comes to just absolutely having your turret front against very good penetration rounds. Okay, so in this situation, I tried to track the Foch, but he manages to repair, and I don't quite have the intra-clip reload to get the second shell in to retrack the Foch to save me. But luckily, it looks like the Foch is going to fall immediately afterwards. So it's an okay game. You know, we did like 5,600 combined, or nearer 5,700 combined. But in a bit of a derailing of this tank review, this game gets very wild later on. So I'll run this at 8 times speed. So the Object 261, maybe 8 times is too fast. The Object 261 shotguns the STRV in our base. And then we have a Batchat 15558, which remember has a turret and an autoloader. My artillery, the Object 261, says that it's the last shot. My Batchat goes in, misses the T92, rams the T92. The Object 261's on 33 hit points and has no ammunition left. And the STRV on our team says, go cap them. And then, like an absolute mad lad, this Object 261 with not... I say, there's not enough time to cap. You're going to have to ram him to death. And this Object 261, with no opportunity to win this game, has a Hail Mary moment at the end. And... well, he does ram him to death. It's just he doesn't survive the ram with 33 hit points. That might be one of the weirdest draws I've ever seen in World of Tanks history. Post-game wise, we did hit a blind shot, so this was 6,000 combined. And shout out to the Object 261, who actually nearly outdamaged me and destroyed a third of the enemy team. And what is up with this? Is this a review of showing Object 261s just making hero plays? Completely obliterated me on Cliff. And now Rainier Vansin just goes in and literally ram kills the final artillery with no ammunition in the vehicle and only 33 hit points. Just ridiculous. But I digress. This is meant to be a Gryphon tank review. And the fact that this vehicle is going to be in the assembly shop this Thursday. So interestingly, for the first time, there are going to be no Gryphons available without styles. There will be 85,000 available on the European server starting at 5 o'clock UTC on the 26th. 10,000 available on the NA server, which will be released on the 27th at 1 a.m. But remember, if you're on the East Coast, that is going to be about 5 hours before that. So on Thursday night, local time, and West Coast in the late afternoon, local time. And on the Asia server, it's going to be released on Thursday. And there's 8,500 available at midday UTC, which I guess is going to be evening time in most Asian countries. Wargaming has made no mention of a price increase, so I believe it's still going to be like a $1 million free experience. Is the Gryphon worth a $1 million free experience? Well, if you don't need to convert it, yeah, I think it is worth a $1 million free experience. I think it's a relatively competitive vehicle. I think it'll be good if you play maneuvers, for example. But if you're planning to just play a British Heavy inside the random queue, you might as well get a can opener. I think you'll have much more fun with the can opener and you'll be much better with the can opener. I even think that a Super Conqueror kind of trades blows with a Gryphon in many areas. And personally for me, I'd probably rather play a Chieftain and just have like maniac level damage per minute on a ridge without having to worry about faffing with the extra shell. Now, sure, the Gryphon does effectively get a free extra piece of equipment as it can't use a gun rammer, but remember, with the soft stats of the vehicle and the accuracy, you're kind of having to improve that so much that extra equipment slot is lost. So all in all, I think the Gryphon will be one of the better assembly shop tanks, but I don't think that this thing is going to revolutionize the game, and I really don't see it being better than tech tree British heavy tanks that we already have. And so if you're somebody who has everything that they want to purchase inside World of Tanks, and you've got 1 million free experience lying around, which you're grinding naturally, and you're not having to convert, then I do think this thing is worth it. However, if you're sitting there with only kind of like 200,000 free experience and thinking, shall I go and spend gold to be able to convert to get this tank? I don't really think this one is essential, and I don't think it's worth it. And wait for my YouTube video tomorrow, where I'll be giving you all of the ins and outs before you buy the Gryphon. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my full tank review on the Gryphon. Really hope this one was useful for you. If it was, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about the new British reward heavy tank. And do you think it's ridiculous that we just had a chieftain go into the game and now we've got a Gryphon? And what do you think about the fact that we have yet another heavy tank? Is this like the 4th or the 5th one from the assembly shop? And finally, what do you think about the assembly shop already coming back this year so soon after the DBV? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.